Welcome to the Washington Heights Church podcast. We're so glad you're here. Each week, we bring you the latest Sunday message filled with God's Word to help strengthen your faith and deepen your walk with Christ. Whether you're tuning in from home, your commute, or anywhere in between, we're thrilled to have you join our community. So, grab a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's get started.
Today we continue the series that we've entitled Living the Dream as we track together with an Old Testament character by the name of Joseph. Just before we jump into that, I want to give you one more reminder that we have created a devotional that goes together with this series. And if you haven't picked one up, know that they're available to you today. This is an opportunity during the week after the Sunday message to go back to the same passage, wrestle with some questions, and apply it more personally to your own life. Many of you have picked this up, but we want to make sure if you haven't been here or for whatever reason that this is available to you today. So here has been an overriding question that we've been asking right from the beginning of this series. And I want to pose it again because we're going to see a specific application of it in today's passage. And it goes something like this. What do I do when I don't know what to do? And it seems like those are the difficult moments in life where, if I had a direction and it seemed like my purpose was being fulfilled and carried out and I was going in, the places that I thought that I would go, that's one thing. But what if I wind up somewhere that is completely confusing and completely disconnected from any semblance of what I thought I was going to do and from far away from where I thought I would be? And so today, what we're going to see in Joseph's life is the application goes to this question: what do you do when your dreams disappear? And all of a sudden, you find yourself in a place where, humanly speaking, you say, there's no way that the dream that I had or was given to me can be fulfilled in this place. If my circumstances change, that would be one thing. But if I am here in this place, there is no way that that dream can be fulfilled. What do you do in that place? So a little bit of a recap in Joseph's life where we've been so far. He had a dream of his future. And it wasn't his own dream, it was a God-given dream that one day he was going to be a star. His brothers and his father were going to bow down to him. But then all of a sudden, things took a turn for the worse. Because that dream was all about his success and his recognition, but then in a family he grew up in, his father adores him, and as a result of that, his brothers hate him. He gets thrown into a pit, and then last week we left him being sold into slavery. How does the dream that God gave me resemble in any way, shape, or form the circumstances in which I find myself now? And I believe in a world like this, there are a lot of people who can identify with being in that situation. This is not where I thought I would be. And on top of that, there are so many things, so many circumstances, so many decisions that are out of my control. Other people have done things. I can't control the economy. I can't control my corporation. I can't control what other people think and say about me. Where does that leave me? And how do I fulfill the dream that God has given? So here I want to give you the big idea as we begin today up front, and we're going to see how this plays out in Joseph's life. No matter the adversity, I always have agency. What is agency? What do we mean? The power to choose, the power to act, the power to respond. There are a lot of things over which we do not have control. You know what we always do have control over is our response, the decisions we make on the other side of that. Well, okay, Joseph, you find yourself in the place you didn't dream of. How do you live this out? What kind of choices did you make when there was all kinds of adversity around you? Here's the first one. That when I can't see the overall plan, I can choose to do the next right thing. Have you ever been in a situation with heavy fog and where you can't see where you're going? It seems like, any vision of the future and destination seems off limits. But if you are in the middle of fog, you know what you can do? You can take the next step. You can see that one, even when you can't see off into the future. And Joseph is in that place where I don't see how my present location ties to the dream that God has given me. So what do you do in that place? He's going to choose to do the next right thing. Genesis 39, let's jump into the story. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Sounds like he's head of security, but a lot of commentators really believe that these words actually mean the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of, by the way, the biggest, largest, most powerful nation on the face of the earth at that time. The captain of the guard bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph. And by the way, that phrase just in this chapter alone shows up 7 times. And there's something really important about this, because sometimes people come to the story of Joseph and they go something like this. Yeah, he was a dreamer. He had a dream. I should get a dream, and I should hold on to that dream and pursue that dream with all the gusto that I have in my life. But remember, it wasn't his dream. God gave him a dream. And here's what we learn from Joseph's story, that God's dream goes with you wherever you go. God's dream is with you wherever you are, even when it's in a place that you did not desire, you did not want, and was totally out of your control. The Lord was with Joseph as a slave in Egypt, so that he prospered and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, because in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food that he ate. The dream went with Joseph everywhere he went. Now here's the thing. Wouldn't it be tempting in that moment to say, hey, look, I didn't ask for any of this, and I'm far from home. You know, why don't I just kind of take matters into my own hands here? Because God, I thought you had a direction for me, and I thought I was doing my part, but apparently you're not doing your part. And so now let me take matters into my own hands, or let me just chart my own course here, because I'm not seeing how this all fits together and how this works. But that's not what Joseph does. You know what he does? He goes to work, and he works for a slave master. And he takes significant administrative and business skills and puts them to use. And did you catch how Potiphar even talked about the Lord, Joseph's Lord? Remember, this is Egypt, and Egypt had a lot of gods in it. What took Potiphar's view and changed it to the Lord, the same God of the Bible that Joseph knew? It was because of the way that Joseph worked, the way that Joseph responded. And sometimes people think this way: the only way to make an impact for God is to work at a church or something like that. Can I just say that's not what Joseph's doing here? You know what he's doing? He's taking his skill set and putting it to use, and he's working hard, and he's doing an excellent job. And reading between the lines a little bit, on occasion when he has the opportunity, he talks about his God as well, and it's making an impact in a place that didn't know anything about the God of the Bible before Joseph showed up. See, God's dream for you goes wherever you are. And in this moment, instead of just saying, well, you know, I had a dream, but I guess all of that's off. I must have misunderstood it or something, and now I'm on my own. Joseph chooses to continue to believe that God is with him, and he continues to follow him. And in this moment, it's taken his skill set and putting it to use there. Did you know that wherever you are, your skill set, your abilities, used for God's sake, and responding by doing the next right thing can have an impact for God's sake? So when there's a lot out of your control, we still have agency. We still have a choice about how we will respond. Joseph responds by saying, I'll do the next right thing. Here's his second decision, that when I'm offered compromise, I can choose integrity. The word integrity is a really cool word, and from the English word integrity comes from the word integer, which is a whole number. And it refers to the idea that there's wholeness between the inside of us and then also what comes out on the outside. so that what we believe is what we do, and what we think is what we carry out. And when we lack integrity, kind of the way we can think about it, it's like we begin to disintegrate because there's a disconnect between who we are on the inside and what's on the outside. And so in this moment, Joseph is going to choose integrity in the middle of significant temptation. Story continues. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." Now you may know this, that the Old Testament, this story here in Genesis was first written in the Hebrew language. And in the Hebrew language, where it says, "Come to bed with me," there's only two words. What are those two words? Sex now is what it literally says there. So she's not real smooth, in kind of the pickup lines here. There's a little bit, askew there. But this is an opportunity, right, on the other side of this for Joseph to say, why not? I am far from home. Nobody will know about it. Nobody will care, what happens in my life now. Again, I didn't ask to be here. This is not even my idea. It's her idea. And then I think this is one maybe that we could all relate to when temptation comes our way, where we think, we might respond by saying, I deserve this. I deserve a little bit of good or positivity in my life, something, that just feels good. Why would I not do this? There aren't a whole lot of things circumstantially that are stopping him. But we're going to find out that Joseph makes a decision here, the decision to choose integrity. But he refused. And we might think that Joseph simply had that opportunity and said no. And what we need to do whenever we face temptation is to just simply look at our temptation and respond by saying no. But I want to let you know in advance, Joseph is not just going to say no, he's going to say yes to some things as well. With me in charge, Joseph told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. What's the first thing Joseph says yes to? Is his responsibility to what he has been entrusted with. And he's already seen God show up in that, and so he does not want to act in a way and decide and respond in a way that would deviate for what he has seen God already do as he put his skills to use, and God showed up and blessed him and Potiphar's house and everybody in it. And so he says yes to his responsibilities, but then he also says this, how then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? So he also says yes to God, God's character, God's nature. And to do this would deviate from who God is and the direction that he has for me. And so he's not just saying no, he's saying yes to something better. And we can choose to focus on my blessings and my responsibility, that when we face temptation, we might be tempted to think that the way to overcome that is just look my temptation in the eye and stare it down and say, no, temptation, no, temptation, no. But I hope that we can learn from Joseph there's a whole lot more than just saying no. Well, what else is there? He's saying yes to something greater, to something better than just that. I want to give you an illustration about that. It comes from Greek mythology. I'm not a huge Greek mythology person, but I think this story really helps, to present this in a way that the Bible talks about as well. And maybe you know this story, but it's a story of Ulysses. And Ulysses was sailing this ship past an island that had sirens on it. Sirens were these beautiful women who would sing this alluring song, and it was so beautiful that any sailors who went by would want to row over in that direction. They were drawn to it, but the drawing was not for a positive purpose. There were rocks and shoals there, and the ships would run aground, and the sailors would be stranded, and many of them died. But to hear the siren's song, it was impossible for people to just pass by. they always wound up being drawn into that song. So Ulysses comes up with an idea. He puts wax in the ears of all the people rowing the boat, and he straps himself with ropes to the ship's mast, and that's what you see in this picture. And so as they make their way past the sirens begin to sing their songs. The rowers can't hear it, so they keep rowing, but Ulysses, who is strapped to the mast, begins to curse the rowers, telling them to take the wax out of their ears and steer over to the sirens, but they cannot hear him either, and so they continue to go, and he makes it through, but he is haunted for the rest of his life by the sound of that song. And every day there is this sense of wonder. What if I would have had the ability to go to the sirens' song? Well, how do you overcome that? Well, in the mythology, there's a story of another man, and his name is Orpheus. And Orpheus gets on a boat, only this time there's no wax in the ears of the rowers, and no one is strapped to the mast. But instead, as they're going by, Orpheus, who is a musician, when they hear the siren's song, he picks up his instrument and he begins to play a better song. And so the oarsmen who are listening, and now there are two songs playing, they are not drawn in the direction of the siren song that lures them to their destruction. Instead, they hear the better song. And this is a picture, an illustration that the Bible talks about in a number of different ways. That the key to overcoming temptation is not to stare it down, to say, there's a siren song, I'm going to say no, I'm going to say no, I'm going to say no. I will say yes to something better, that I will hear the better song and follow that. Here's one way the Bible talks about this, is in the book of Romans. Those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on what the flesh desires. That my focus and my attention is on the cravings and desires that I have, some of which want to lure me to some form of destruction. So what do? Just say no? If you're old enough to remember, back in the 80s, there was an ad campaign trying to encourage people not to do drugs, and it was called just that, just say no. And if you know anything about that, it was a huge failure. You know why? Because that's not really a recipe for success. You can't just say no. Well, what are we supposed to do? Say yes to something better. Listen to the better song. Here's the rest of Romans 8:5. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds set on what the Spirit desires. So you don't stare down your temptation and just through willpower try to say no. You change your focus. And you focus on God, who is singing a better song to you and me, and who wants to lead us toward life. And in a moment of temptation, Joseph chooses to act with integrity. Well, the story goes on, and although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me," but he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Now, you've been with us through this story, or you know this story. Every time Joseph has a coat, he gets in trouble. You know, it's like, Joseph, just go with T-shirts from here on out. You know, coats don't seem to be serving you very well. And when she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew," which, by the way, is a racist statement here, "has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." This is somebody who knows they're going to be asked some questions and wants to get their story out before somebody else's story gets out. She kept his cloak beside her until her master came home. Then she told him this story: "That Hebrew slave you brought us here came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, 'This is how your slave treated me,' he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined." And at this point of the story, Joseph has to be thinking, you have got to be kidding me. I'm trying to do the right thing here, and if I do a good thing and a right thing, and I'm trying to honor a God who's good, therefore good things must be coming my way. And Joseph says, that's not necessarily true. that sometimes the rewards of doing the right thing are not good things that come our way, but there is still a reward on the other side of that. And I think there's some people who can identify with people saying things about you that aren't true, winding up in places where you don't want to be. And what do you do on the other side of that? But while Joseph was there in prison, here it is again, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. So what do we do when we do the right thing and still there are the wrong things that happen on the other side of that? Here's what Joseph chose to do. When I can't see the blessings, I can choose to be a blessing. And that's what he does, even in prison. You know you're doing well in prison when you're a prisoner and they give you keys to the prison, right? And that's what's happening in his life. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. And I think in this, Joseph clues us into something that people often wonder about. How do you live inside of a culture that is hostile? Hostile maybe to your faith, to your belief, hostile to the choices that you make. What do you do? And it's really easy to maybe go to the same level of what is said and done to us. Joseph says, no, you got another choice available to you. No matter the adversity, you have agency. You have the power to choose. What does he choose to do? He chooses to be a blessing. It's not the only time the Bible talks about this. Centuries later, the nation of Israel is about to be defeated in battle, and many of the people are going to be carried off into exile to live as slaves inside of another country. What do you do there? What would God want for us to do in that place? Here's what he says to them just before they head out. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. You be a blessing there. Well, but this isn't where I wanted to be, and these people are treating me in ways I didn't want to be treated. You be a blessing there. Peter talks about it this way in the New Testament. Live such good lives among the pagans as the people who are not followers of the Jesus of the Bible, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. That's not doing good things so that people would think good things about you. It is doing things that would reflect who God is, so that those dots could be connected to people who may not yet know him. Choose to be a blessing, even when you can't see the blessings. Well, what would a modern day version of this be? Because I think there are none of us who are going to be sold into slavery, and we're not going to live as slaves inside of another nation. But I think the story of Joseph still plays out in this day. Let me introduce you to one story that I think, reflects this really, really well. This is Jay and Catherine Wolfe. They met at Samford University, and Jay went on to study law, and Catherine got a job working as a model and an actress in California when they moved there. And they got married, and they're followers of Jesus, and a couple years into their marriage, they had a baby together, and when that baby was 6 months old, one day, Catherine is walking into the living room, just as normal as could be, felt a little bit dizzy, and then her fingers went numb, and then she wobbled a little bit, and then she went down. She was rushed to the hospital, and she had a massive stroke at the base of her brain. And the doctors, to keep her alive, had to amputate portions of her brain. There was a long recovery on the other side of that. Things had to be relearned, like talking and walking. And here you see a little bit of that journey, the before picture on the left, during the hospital stay in the middle, and then her present condition on the right. So what do you do on the other side of being dealt some cards, right, that you never chose, you wouldn't want? Well, Catherine speaks about that, and she was interviewed by Shape magazine not that long ago, and she shared some insights about how she has chosen to respond. This is a couple minutes long here, this video, but I think it's really, really helpful. Check this out.
And And we can still experience joy in those same stories. And we're here for that. We're so obsessed with the life we thought we would have that we can't wake up to the life that's right in front of our noses. Honestly, we're like, but wait, when I was 4 years old, I really thought this was going to be my life, but I was 37 years old. If I was obsessed with that, it would be really sad right now. But I'm not. My 4-year-old dreams, bye-bye. My 37-year-old dreams are here to stay, and they're awesome. This is my life, and I have the opportunity to love this and to champion it really well, even though it's never the story I would have chosen or written. Like, I can recognize and wake up to the life right in front of me is the best life. Honestly, we cannot control what happens to us, a lot of it. We cannot control. But what we do have control over is how we respond to it. We have control over how we respond, how we think about it, and ultimately we have a huge responsibility to remember it correctly. For instance, in my own life, post-stroke, I've had to have a lot of really bad surgeries, 11 actually, a lot of just like very real difficult pain. And I can be really scared. And yet, I know too much to be really scared. Like, I don't die. I get through surgeries. I come out the other side. And there is such a comfort in remembering well where you are today. And that is, that's something we all have the opportunity to do, is that we are where we are today by what happened. What a powerful thought for us. Like, maybe all the bad stuff is being used in such a powerful way to inform how we live this life. You know, I fancy myself a joy rebel. I am rebelling with joy. And that is something we entirely have the ability to do, is no matter how hard our stories are, we get to be the joy rebel. Don't miss the life right in front of you, even if it's not the life that you ever imagined when you were a little girl.
What the world could use now? Some joy rebels. Some people who recognize that, yeah, even if I did not want to be here, God's dream is here. The dream that God gives. And so I will choose joy. I love what she said. Don't miss the life right in front of you, even if it's the life you never imagined. So no matter the adversity, I still have agency. A lot of things we can't control. We can control our response. For Joseph, what was it? I can choose to do the next right thing. I can choose integrity, and I can choose to be a blessing. Is there one of those that right now applies to you? And remember, as we do that, we also follow a Jesus who also experienced people slandering him, lying about him, being put on trial, being found guilty for something he did not do, confined by death. But he is greater. And so we follow in the footsteps of a Savior who understands if you walk that same road. So much we can't control, but we always control our response. Would you pray together with me? So God, thank you that we belong to a God who is greater, God greater than our circumstances. And God, I pray that we would know how much your God-given dream for us and our lives is in your hands and not the hands of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. That your dream goes with us wherever we go because you are there. You have promised us in a relationship with you, you will never leave us or forsake us. And so God, even in the prisons of life, you are there. And so God, would we come to know that, not just in principle, not just to understand that intellectually, but give us the ability and the strength and the courage to live that out in reality. And God, maybe in this world, we could be joy rebels when there seems to be less and less of that joy to go around. Help our hope to be all the more in you. We ask and pray all of this in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed today's message. If you found this sermon meaningful, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more people and spread the word. Stay connected with us throughout the week by following us on social media at Washington Heights Church on Facebook and Instagram, and by visiting our website at whc.faith. For more information and additional resources, check out the podcast description below. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.